Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the UFC 220 recap. Today we're going to take a look at, obviously, the fight that just happened this past weekend. We'll take a look at the main card at least, and we'll talk about Matt Bessette a little bit, who lost, unfortunately. And we talked about him a little bit on the last podcast, if you got to listen when I had Tanner Hall on. He's a guy out of Connecticut. He had like 30 fights almost. I think that was his 30th pro fight, so we had some experience. We'll talk about him. Like I said, we'll break down the main card. And then I want to look at some of the matchups that they have announced. And one that I don't think it's official, but they're talking about announcing. And I've been waiting for this one for a long time. And that's TJ Dillashaw versus Demetrious Johnson. And the other bouts that I think these are all official. They just announced them. Khabib and Tony, Joanna and Rose, and Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, I believe, which is a hell of a fight. All those are excellent fights. So yeah, like I said, we'll take a look at the card in a bit. Let's go through these potential fights first. Let's work our way through those. I've been harping about this one. TJ Dillashaw versus Demetrious Johnson, to me, is the most interesting matchup maybe of 2018, maybe ever. That's a bit of a... not ever, but it's up there. It's really good because this is going to answer a lot of questions about the 125-pound division because Demetrious Johnson has blown through absolutely everybody. And if he can step up 10 pounds and beat the current title holder at 135, you have to consider him the greatest fighter of all time. I don't know who, I mean, in my opinion, like if you watch a fighter, John Jones passes all the tests for me, but he's in trouble with the steroids and stuff and with the law all the time, and who the fuck knows what's going on with him. Demetrious Johnson is, I don't think this is argued, he's the greatest active fighter. And he's in the top 3 discussion without a doubt. He's got to be up there with Silva, top 4. Okay, Silva, GSP, Jones, and him. You can make an argument for all those guys, I think, and have a pretty solid case for each of them. But one of the main questions that I want answered is how good is the 125-pound division? Because Demetrious Johnson beats people so badly that people assume that there's no competition at 125. Like, they think there's a lack of it. And I personally don't think that's the case. I think that it's a talent. It's not as talent stacked as some divisions, but it has talent in it, and he's just so fucking good that he makes them look mediocre. I mean, he really does. No disrespect to anyone that's fought Johnson yet, but he makes them look like they don't belong in there with him. So fighting a guy like TJ Dillashaw, who, like I said, 10 pounds heavier, 135 is a shark tank too. There are some really good fighters at 135. You've got Almeida just lost, but Font is up and coming. I mean, he just picked up a big win, and he's fought a top guy like Lineker, so he knows he's got some high-level experience in that regard. Jimmy Rivera, Dominic Cruz. I mean, that division is loaded, especially up top. Like, within the top, 8 to 10, I would say. You got some really, really good fighters. And you know what? And you know why I think the 135-pound division gets credit for having good fighters? Because the title changes hands. That is like the sign to people that, oh, okay, these people must all be really good. Well, maybe Johnson is just so much better than everyone at 125. Like, take Johnson out of the picture. Do you really think there's a champion? A person who would win the championship at 125 who would hold on to it for as long as he did? No fucking way. There's two, like Henry Cejudo and Benavidez, they'd probably go back and forth. You got Pettis coming up through. He probably wouldn't win it yet, but he's gonna in a bit. But as long as Johnson's there, no one at 125 is going to win that belt. Dodson probably would have won a belt down there if Johnson wasn't there. And this fight is going to tell you just how good that, like, is Demetrious Johnson really just that good? Like, if he goes up and works TJ Dillashaw, which I think is going to be a hard thing to do, because I've said this before, I think one of the things that Demetrious Johnson does is he goes out and it'll be the first round. And when he takes you down and you realize that you're being suffocated and this guy, he's everywhere, right? He's so technically sound and he has great cornering. That's one of the most underrated parts of the game is cornering. He listens to his corner. If you're ever watching a fight and you see someone not listening to the corner, that is not a good sign to me, because it means that he doesn't believe in what you're saying. Like, he trusts himself more than he trusts you. And that's your coach, man. That's like the guy that you have to listen to. That's not a good thing. And I know they probably don't hear everything they're saying. Like, some people probably, when that adrenaline starts going through them and they're in a fist fight in front of how many thousands of people, it's probably hard to hear everything going on, right? But Demetrius Johnson is one of those guys who, when his coaches talk, he listens and he executes. And it's a part of the game that I don't think gets talked about enough. Like, people who do a good job cornering don't get enough credit. And you know who, speaking of, on this past card, Weidman cornered Valanche, and he did a damn good job. I thought he gave him some really good advice. And he caught an opening that, I mean, I think they talked about it, the Rogan, Cruz, and them were talking about it, but talking about following up with a left hook. Little pieces like that, because what you're trying to do in a fight, it's just a collection of moments, and it's a puzzle. And you're trying to solve this puzzle. You're trying to put all the pieces together. And it's almost like when the coach gives you that advice and you listen to it, he's giving you a piece to that puzzle. And then when you get that piece, maybe this piece comes into play, and then you can start putting things more together more easily as that picture becomes more and more clear. That's why cornering is so important. So, anyway, to get back to the fight between Johnson and TJ, hell of a fight. I hope it happens. I'm really looking forward to it. Like I said, one of the greatest. It's got to be one of the top 10 matchups of all time. I mean, this is a question that I want to see answered. And like I said, TJ Dillashaw is not going to be that guy who goes into a cocoon when he senses danger. Like, I think you could beat TJ Dillashaw for 4 rounds, and if he has it in him, and if his body will let him, he's going to be coming out aggressive in the 5th round. So don't expect Johnson to go out and take him down. Like, if he lands an early takedown and sits on top of him, TJ's not a quitter. Like, you saw that against Cody, right? When he got his bell rung and then he went back and then he came out and knocked Cody out in the 2nd round. Like, he's going to come back and fight, and he's aggressive all the time. So I have a lot of interest in seeing how that fight plays out, and I hope it happens. I think they said they're looking at July, so fingers crossed. The next one that a lot of people are obviously going to be interested in is Joanna and Rose, because it was looking for a long time like Joanna was never going to lose. Kind of like a Mighty Mouse situation, right? But Rose came out, clipped her, and put her away. And I also think that a lot of people, myself included, thought that if Rose was going to win that fight, it was going to be by some like crazy flying armbar type shit that created some weird scramble and let Rose lock on a submission. But no, she came out and outstruck her and looked really good doing it. And she's young, nice, like really pretty, promotable, humble kid. And Joanna's promotable too. She's all those things as well. She's just a little bit more fierce when the lights are on her. You know what I mean? Like when they're doing the stare downs and stuff and she's getting up in your face. But that's an interesting rematch because this is the first time that we've really seen any adversity. Not that she hasn't faced adversity in the octagon, but this is a loss and she has to come off of that loss. And we're going to get to see how Joanna reacts to a loss like that. Like, are you going to be able to come back and defend against someone who just beat you? I talk about the mental aspects of the game a lot because I think they're super important. Like, it would be so hard to climb back into an octagon. Like, Aldo and Holloway is a perfect example. Knowing that person beat you and knowing that whatever game plan, especially in Joanna's case, like Joanna lost via what she's best at, which is striking. That has to be so hard to overcome. Like, that's a barrier that you have to break down in your head because, like I said, you just got outclassed in your specialty. Like, you have to be able to overcome that. And I think Joanna strikes me as the type of person who is going to be able to. It's just whether she's going to be able to execute against someone as high level as Rose. Because Rose is going to be walking in with that confidence. That's a really interesting fight. And I think that's on the same night as Tony and Khabib. I could be wrong on that. I apologize if I am, but I'm pretty sure that's right. The other matchup that I think just got booked is Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. And if you're Poirier, this has to be a title eliminator, right? Not for Gaethje, but it's a fun fight for the fans because you know these guys are going to stand up and throw at each other. And Gaethje's coming off a loss to Alvarez, so he's still trying to find his footing in the 155-pound division. Poirier, on the other hand, is coming off a win over Pettis, who is a top-tier striker. But I don't want to take anything away from Poirier because he had an amazing performance and a gutsy performance. It was gritty, and he looked good. He's looked good his last few fights. But, man, Pettis just doesn't seem like the same fighter anymore, does he? Something is off, and I don't know if it's his drive or if something is just, like, wrong with him confidence-wise or something in his I don't know what's going on, but he doesn't look the same. And it's like he gets broken. And that's the best word I have for it, is broken. Like, you can see his spirit, like, leaves him at some point in the fight. Like I said, not taking anything away from Poirier. It was a fantastic performance. But I think a win over Gaethje probably gets him a title shot. No, I say that, but then we got to talk about this next fight, right? Because they're finally sorting out this top 3 business. Khabib and Tony. I think this fight is, when is it? April 7th? I believe. Yeah, I think it's April 7th. And I've been wanting this top 3 to get sorted out at 155 for a long time now. Because you've got Conor. You got a little, like, love triangle going on, right? You got Conor, Tony, and Khabib. And Khabib just came off a win against Edson Barboza, who's one of the top 5 strikers maybe in UFC history. Pure striking. I'm not talking about, like, his striking credentials are fantastic. He's amazing. And Khabib made that fight look easy and was never in any real danger. And Tony, who's coming off a gritty win over Kevin Lee, and he submitted him, caught him in a triangle. I mean, granted, I see people like, oh, that staph infection, like, that's an excuse. That's not a fucking excuse. Like, credit to Kevin Lee for going out and still fighting that fight. Because I've never had it, thank God. I mean, knock on wood, right? But staph, I've heard, is fucking miserable. And it zaps you of your energy. Imagine, like, the grueling camp that you just went through, and then you're about to go, and then all the adrenaline that it builds up in you before you fight, and then you go out and you deal with that adrenaline dump and the staph. I couldn't imagine going through that. Again, not taking anything away from Tony Ferguson. That was a fantastic performance. And he looked good. Kevin Lee had his moments. Kevin Lee is a stud. I think that kid's going to hold a belt one day or another. He's just so fucking good. He's one of those guys who would probably do really well at a 165-pound division. Like, the guys at 170 are probably a little bit too big for him because the gap, I think Rogan is spot on this. You need a weight class every 10 pounds. Because guys like him are just, and I understand that the argument is going to be, well, people are just going to cut down. Yeah, but what about guys like Lee? I'm not saying to make a weight class especially for those guys. I think you would see less people would drop out because they're missing weight. And I think you'd see more competition and more people finding their true weight classes that they belong in. And I think that would kind of elevate the talent that you would see. I really do. I think it would create better matchups. I think it'd be better for the sport. And I know that Dana White and all them are harping about, like, well, we don't want to dilute it. We don't want to dilute the sport. How many divisions are there in the UFC? There's 125, 135, 145, 55, 70, 85, 205, and heavyweight, right? So you got 8 right there. You're already keeping track of 8 champions. And then you throw in the 115-pound division for women, 125, 135, and 145. We're already keeping track of 12 divisions. Do you really think it's going to hurt to add like 2 or 3 more? People aren't going to quit watching because you added 2 or 3 more weight classes. That is ridiculous. It'll be safer for the fighters, and it'll create better competition. I, in my heart of hearts, believe that. But let's talk about Khabib and Tony a little bit. Interesting matchup, right? Because like I said, Khabib, both coming off good wins. Khabib just manhandled Barboza. Tony obviously is interim champ when he beat Kevin Lee. And Conor, to me, I think Conor and his camp are banking on because the UFC has an event booked in Russia for September. Conor is banking on Khabib winning and fighting him in September in Russia. That's my thoughts. And I mean, I really don't care when they all fight. They're all going to have to fight, in my opinion. Like, Conor's going to get a lot of shit for sitting out, but everyone knows that he has to come back and fight the winner of this fight. Because if not, he's going to look... Conor doesn't want to look like a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, as much as... like, he doesn't want to just walk away knowing that he left those two hanging around. And he's probably thinking in his head, too, which is kind of smart, because this is a game that you want to get out of. He's letting them, like, do a little bit of the elimination for him. If Khabib beats Tony or Tony beats Khabib, Conor only has to fight and beat one of them. Not both of them. One of them. Whereas if he beat Tony Ferguson in an interim title, he would have to defend it against Khabib. But he's kind of like narrowing the weight class down a little bit and getting to cement his legacy over what he thinks is a favorable matchup against Khabib. So it's going to be interesting to see how this fight plays out. They've been booked like 3 times now, and every time they fight, I think I've had a different opinion on who I think's going to win, and I really don't have anything yet. I mean, what an interesting matchup though, because Tony Ferguson, we've seen Khabib take people down, and when he takes people down, they don't get back up. And Tony Ferguson is a black belt under Eddie Bravo, and if you think that Tony Ferguson is going to just sit on his back and let Khabib work, you're wrong. He's going to attack. His guard is developed. It's just going to be, is he going to be able to do anything? The key to beating Khabib might just be getting back to your feet. And if Tony can do that, he might have a chance on his feet. But, oh man, what a task. Because if you look at Khabib, I think he's the best grappler in the history of the UFC. I really do. Him and another guy, Cormier, they're out of the same camp too. Him and Cormier they're definitely the 2 best wrestlers right now, and arguably all time. I mean, Cormier, if you saw, we'll talk about the fight in a little bit, but he is just next level with the way that he can take guys down and hold them there and control them. All right, so let's move on to the main card. Actually, no, let's talk about Bissett, because we talked about him a little bit on the last podcast. Bissett's a guy out of Connecticut who my buddy Tanner Hall had a chance to train with a few times, and really talented young kid. I think he fought on 10 days notice. I think he took this fight on short notice, which is rough to do. And he had a good first round, and then he just struggled to stop the takedown. And he fought Enrique Barzola, just to clarify. But Barzola started landing the takedown, and then you really saw Bissett kind of struggle after that. Like, once Barzola figured out that he could take him down, he just stuck with that game plan, which is smart. And man, kudos to Barzola on the win, but hats off to Bissett too. Bissett for taking the fight on short notice like that. But when the UFC calls, you don't pass it up. You have to jump on that. So, and with the fight he had, it wasn't a boring fight. If you guys have Fight Pass and got to see it, it was a good fight. I think Bissett will be back. I think he's a guy that if you give him a full camp, he's really going to put on a performance. Like, he's coming out to fight. Tanner said this in the last podcast, and it shows when you watch this kid fight. He's just a blue-collar guy. And really, he's got a big right hand. You can see that he was trying to set up some leg locks, but when you're fighting MMA, you can't just dive on a leg without getting hit in the face. You know, you're going to take some punishment for that. So the setups have to be different. I'd like to see him work on the entries for those leg locks, because he knows what he's doing. I think he's a brown belt, if I'm thinking right. I could be wrong. But he's a kid with, like, he's lost like 7. I think this was his 8th fight. So this loss isn't going to be the one that, like, really puts him down in the dumps, you know, especially if the UFC calls him back. I think he's going to be back. And he's a guy to watch out for. He's got experience. Experience is always a very dangerous weapon to have, especially when you're fighting. I know that was his debut, but he was, like I said, he had almost 30 fights, and unfortunately couldn't get the job done. But I think we're going to see a lot more of him. Like I said, he gets a full camp under his belt. I really expect some impressive things out of him. I guess some standouts on the prelims. Ortiz won again in a pretty dominant fashion over Pantoja. Now, let's just jump right to the main card because, like, there were some good fights on the prelims, but I want to start talking about some of the guys up top. So the first fight was Rob Font versus Thomas Almeida. And this was the last podcast I took Almeida to win the fight. And pretty good fight, honestly. It was back and forth for a little bit. Like, first round I thought was kind of hard to score. Probably could give it to either guy. And then Font came out and got the knockout, just stunned him. And big win for Font. And these are two guys who are young. Like I said before, Almeida, I think, was 22-0 before he lost to Garbrandt, and then he picked up a win. Then he lost to Rivera, and now he lost to Font. It's really not all that bad. Like, I know those two losses don't look good, but they're not bad losses. Like, he's going to get another chance. And he's young, and if he can recover from that, he should be back. He should get another run. Font, though, is going to leap up into probably the top 10 somewhere. I think he was 14 before that. I could be off on that, right? I have the stats pulled up here, but it's not telling me what they're ranked. I think he was 14. He'll get into the top 10, and then he's going to have to start fighting some of those guys in that Shark Tank. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of good fighters at 135 now. Probably, in my opinion, I think it's the second best division behind 155. The bantamweight division is just stacked with talent. And it's going to be interesting to watch. And you've got young people in it. That's important. Because you got guys like Almeida, like Font, who are going to be able to come in and start challenging some of these guys who have been around for a while, like Dominic Cruz, for example. I don't know who you give them next. I'm not real sure. I don't have the rankings pulled up or anything right now. I just kind of did this on a whim tonight. I got a brand new fancy little microphone from Amazon for like $20, and it works pretty good. So I was like, I'm gonna go use it. So I didn't do a whole lot of research. I just thought I'd come down here and start bullshitting about some of the matchups that got announced in the fights that happened the past weekend. All right, moving on to Valanche and Francimar. I do so bad at pronouncing these foreign people's names. I feel bad. I'm sorry, but Barroso. I think Valanche won a split decision, which is total fucking horseshit, because he won the fight, hands down. I thought it was 30-27. Good fight, and I'm looking at the stats here, and they both threw 74 significant strikes. They had the same amount, but you could tell that Valanche was winning the fight. You know what I mean? His shots were more meaningful. He was pushing the pace. He had Barroso's back against the fence the whole time, and I just thought he fought a better fight. I didn't think that was I complain about judging all the goddamn time, and this is why. I think you need 10 judges, and people are going to argue and say you should have like an odd number, and I don't think so. I think that if you have 10 people judging a fight, and 5 of them decide that one person won, and 5 decide that another person won, how do you call a winner of that fight? Like, I don't understand how you... Sorry, guys, my dog just ran down here, so I had to pause for a second. Anyway, who were we talking about? Oh, Valanche and Barroso. Yeah, I thought... Oh, we were talking about judging. That's where we just left off. I think you need 10, because if 5 people think you won a fight and 5 people think that you didn't win a fight, like, there's a pretty good argument, in my opinion, that fight is a tie. And I don't think ties are a bad thing. Like, they're really closely contested fights. And to me, if 6 people out of 10 agree that someone won a fight, that's more convincing than 2 out of 3, especially when you're seeing decisions like this where one of the judges clearly has a fucking screw loose. I don't know. Maybe that's an argument for another time, but you hate to see, especially guys like Valanche, he's in a position where he has to win his fights. So it would suck to get screwed out of a fight by the judges on a fight that you definitely should have won. Like, I know people are always saying, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. Well, sometimes you have to, and you need to. If that was the case, let's just have fights to the finish. You know what I mean? Let's just fight till someone quits, gets knocked out, or gets submitted. If if that's your argument, then let's do that. And maybe that is a better way to do it. I don't know. I personally think that every single fight should have to go 5 rounds. I don't think 3 rounds is enough to determine the outcome of a fight. Like, if someone doesn't get finished within that 15-minute window, let's find out who's going to be able to implement their game plan when they're gassed and when they're tired. Like, those extra 10 minutes make a big difference. And I think that those are rounds that you really start to see high-level fighters take over in. And I know that it would be, like, the cards are already long enough. Like, they take forever to get through a fight card. And it's not going to get implemented, but I really think that it would be a good idea. I think that you should have, like, the idea that a 5-minute rounds for a championship fight. Like, I get it, but I don't at the same time. Like, let's make this universal. The only thing that those 2 guys up top are fighting for, the only thing different about what they're fighting for is the fact that they get to put a piece of gold around their waist. I don't know. Like I said, maybe this is all better saved for a different podcast or episode or whatever, but something has to happen. Next fight was Burgos. He had a lot of hype coming into this. Like I said, there was one fight I saw where he was like a negative 650 favorite or something like that. But he got knocked out by Qatar in the 3rd round. And, man, this was a really good fight too, because this is one of those ones that if it would have went to the judges, man, I don't know who would have won. I personally thought Qatar won, but I don't know who the judges would give it to. And you kind of can't blame them if a fight like this goes the distance. But Qatar got the finish, and kind of questionable, kind of not. I thought it was a good stoppage because he got clipped, and you could tell it looked like he was about to get back up, like he was trying to defend himself, but I don't know. The way he fell down when he hit him, I thought you could have stopped it right there, but he just bounced back to life. It kind of reminded me of Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard when Frankie got clipped and then he just bounced, and you're like, oh my God, this is over. I don't know if you gave Burgos the same leeway that you gave Edgar in that fight against Maynard. Maybe Burgos would have rebounded and came back. I don't know. I don't think it was a bad stoppage. I don't think it was a great one, but I don't think it's one that you can have a really solid argument against. So hats off to Qatar. That's a big win against a guy who, like I said, had a lot of hype coming into this. I think Qatar himself has only lost 2 fights. So big win for him. He's going to start seeing a step up in competition now. But if you can beat a guy like Burgos, like I think Burgos was 10-0 or something like that, you can start making a run. All right, let's get on to the co-main in the main event. So Cormier fought Ozdemir, and coming out right out of the gate, Ozdemir looked pretty good, right? Like, he was using his length a little bit whenever he would get in close. He kind of just pushes you away. Like, when he gets tied up in the clinch and realizes he doesn't like it, he's so big and powerful. He looked really strong early on. And then Cormier landed 2 big shots on him in the first round, and then ended up getting him to the ground at the end of the round, hopped on his back and locked in a rear naked choke, was gonna submit him. If that round maybe goes 5 to 10 seconds longer, Ozdemir is going to tap out or pass out. And then DC comes out the next round and takes him down, gets him in the crucifix position, and just beats his face in. And Cormier talked about this the entire lead up to the fight, and couldn't have hit the nail more on the head. There are levels to the game. And Ozdemir, he's probably going to be one of those guys that get there at 205, but he's not there yet. DC is so fucking elite. People are starting to give him more credit now, but the only guy he's ever lost to was John Jones, and he used to fight at heavyweight. His wrestling credentials are unbelievable, and he's probably the 2nd best light heavyweight of all time. I mean, and one of the things Volkan, I think, was relying on his power. I think he knew he was going to get outclassed if he took down, but I think he was relying on knocking him out. And you got to remember, man, Daniel Cormier fought Anthony Johnson. He knows what it feels like to get hit hard. Remember that first fight where Johnson sent him flying across the octagon? I thought he was going to knock him out. I was like, this fight's over. DC just weathered it, came back, gets the finish. I mean, he's amazing. And it sucks for him that John Jones exists even. I hate, from a fan perspective, obviously Jones has done amazing things in the octagon. It's a shame that he's such a fuck up. But for Cormier, his legacy is always going to be overshadowed by John Jones, who is arguably the best fighter of all time. And it sucks for him because he's a good guy. He's a family man, great fighter. Like I said, probably the second best light heavyweight ever. And I'm glad to see that people are giving him the credit that he deserves. But I don't know. Like, no matter what he does, he's never going to overcome the fact that he lost to John twice. And what do you do with John if he comes back? Because I think I saw an interview with Dana White where he said that he thinks John will come back in 2018. Like, what do you do? Do you make him fight DC again? I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. Because I know John Jones got caught on steroids, but I don't think that's the reason he beat DC. I think he's just so fucking good. The way he was going, like, I know he was getting tagged a little bit, but the way he was going to the body to set up the shot to the head that ended that fight, he's a genius. There's no one like John Jones. Maybe Demetrius Johnson, but we can save the greatest of all time talk, the overall GOAT talk, for another time. But yeah, hats off to DC. He's probably going to end up fighting who the fuck knows next. Maybe Glover Teixeira. Gustafsson is a fight I want to see. I know they already fought, but to me that's the most intriguing matchup because they had a good fight the first time, and Gustafsson is, to me, the clear number one contender at 205 right now. Or maybe he fights the winner of the guy that we're going to talk about next, Stipe, because that's a hell of a fight, and DC used to fight at heavyweight. But that's all going to depend on what's going on with Kane, obviously, right? Those guys at American Kickboxing Academy, they're a tight-knit group. He's not going to step into the heavyweight division and try to take it over if Cain Velasquez is coming back. But if Velasquez is planning on coming back, like maybe even at the end of the year, book a fight with Stipe this summer, and just, if DC wins, relinquish the title and let Cain fight next. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's not like he's stepping on Cain's toes. Cain's injured and he's out. I think it makes perfect sense to do that. But that's a good segue into the next fight because Stipe was able to weather the early storm and then completely dominate Ngannou. I mean, it wasn't even a close fight after the first round. The first round was pretty crazy. Both landed some big shots. And then when the second came, I mean, Stipe just, for the next 4 rounds, just kind of laid on him. And he was doing work. I'm not saying that he was hitting him, but he was doing a lot of just like pushing down on the neck, and it was a smart game plan because there was a moment in the 3rd or 4th round when, as gassed as Ngannou was, when he stood back up, he hit Stipe with a shot, and you were like, oh, fuck, that power's still there. Like, that power didn't go anywhere. So I'm really interested to see how Ngannou comes back from this because, like I just said, that late in the round, you could see how tired it was. You could see it on his face, the way he was like wobbling around a little bit when he was going back to his corner. I think that Ngannou needs to realize that he doesn't have to end the fight in the first round. He just has to fight smart and conserve energy because, boy, that if he hits you, he's going to hurt you. So, I don't know. Disappointing loss for Ngannou a little bit because you were on this tear, but great win for Stipe. I mean, that was outstanding. It is so impressive for him to be able to weather that early storm from a guy that powerful and with that striking prowess, and to be able to go out and grind out a win like that. And now the argument is whether Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time, right? I don't think so. I still think the crown belongs to Fedor, but Stipe is the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. I don't think there's a doubt about that. But I think if Stipe could defend the belt one more time against a guy like Cain or against a guy like even DC, I think you can give him the crown then. But here's the problem with Francis, and sometimes, I know we didn't know this going into it, obviously, but sometimes you find these things out and you have to take them into consideration. Francis Ngannou, when he got put on the ground, there were things, and not just like little things that he was doing wrong and getting out. There were massive gaps in his game on the ground. I mean, there were fundamentals missing from a lot of what he was doing. Like, that makes me nervous because when you see that once you can get him out of the first round, I mean, like, look at what you were able to expose. So to me, that is, don't get me wrong, impressive win. Like, Ngannou's striking is incredible. And if you stand up with him and try to trade with him, you're probably going to lose that battle. And I'm not taking anything away from Stipe. Great title defense. I mean, he broke the record. That's almost, I mean, clear. It's been impossible to do up until this point, right? But there were things missing from Ngannou's game. But you know who doesn't have things missing from their game? Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier. Like, those things that Ngannou were lacking on the ground, they are not. And Cain is a cardio machine. I mean, if you could watch any UFC event and somehow Joe Rogan's going to tell you how good Cain Velasquez's cardio is. And it is impressive. I'll give him that. So let's see Stipe fight one more top-tier guy like that before handing him the crown. Because in my eyes, it's Fedor. I think he holds that crown until Stipe wins one more. And I think a win over Cain or DC will do it for me. I think that it'll be enough to give him the title. Because you got to remember, too, I know Fedor never fought in the UFC, but he was fighting a lot of guys that weren't in the UFC because the structure was different back then. Like, the contracts weren't as rigid as they are now, and people bounced around from organization to organization to organization trying to get fights. So he fought a lot of the UFC talent, but just never made it to the UFC. Yeah, man, crazy card. Because, like I said, the most impressive win to me was Stipe. Because you gotta, like, I just went on a rant, right, about how it wasn't like, I can't call him the GOAT yet, but Ngannou is so good at forcing his will on you in that first round. And I kind of knew going into it that Ozdemir wasn't going to beat DC. Like, I just had a feeling. Like, nothing is for certain in fighting. But with Ngannou, he just knocked out Overeem, who's a credentialed striker, but Overeem is a guy who's been knocked out a lot. And just I also say it's impressive, the most impressive performance of the night, just because of the magnitude of what he did. Like, defending the UFC heavyweight title for the third time in a row is no small feat. So I would say performance of the night has to go to him. He could have fought almost any heavyweight, and I would have said the same thing. It is so hard to defend the belt against guys with... You have to be so smart to not get clipped by one of those fucking monsters. That belt changes hands so often. To defend it even 3 times is a huge accomplishment. And shout out to Stipe, who is a guy that I like a lot, running into burning buildings and shit like that. He's a crazy motherfucker, and he proved it Saturday night. I think that does it for this one, guys. I might roll one out for the fight nights that are coming up. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. The Eagles just made it to the Super Bowl, so I'm pretty damn excited about that. So, I don't know. I don't think I'll do one for Super Bowl weekend, but I'll probably do one. I think there's a fight coming up this weekend, right? Am I making that up? If there is, I think I'll roll one out for that. Also, I think probably sometime this week I'm going to have Tanner on again, and we're going to do an episode where we strictly talk about jiu-jitsu. Because when we got going in the last one, there were a lot of things that I wanted to ask him and get his perspective on. Because he's a purple belt, and he's been doing this for like 4 years, I think it is now, 3 or 4. So he's got a bit more experience than me, and he knows what the fuck he's doing. He competes a lot, too. He just took second, I think, in absolutes. And where the fuck did he go to do it? I'd have to ask him. I can't remember. But he took second. He lost to a guy, I think, who was a brown belt and weighed like 250 pounds. So he's been killing it in competition and stuff. So. But, all right, guys, that wraps it up. I'll catch you later. Thanks for listening.